It's a no spoiler review, thoughts, assessment, not really an assessment because I'm not grading anything, of A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles. You know, what I thought of it, more really, you know, how it made me feel, what it made me think of, I guess would be more accurate. So a count who is, like, he's literally just like a degree or two removed from the Tsar. He gets placed under house arrest during the Bolshevik Revolution, October Revolution, 1917, 1819, that sort of time. And I think it was for some, you know, innocuous enough crime, like in modern eyes, like it's, you know, he was writing a letter, or I think it was a poem actually, or maybe it could have even been, you know, for just being a count. And so he's sentenced to life in the opulent Metropole Hotel in the center of Moscow. And it's pretty much where he lived anyway whenever he visited Moscow. And I went into this book thinking it was going to be a completely different book. Just the words gentleman and Moscow and any time period before the fall of the Berlin Wall, my head just goes straight to John le Carré. And I went into this like thinking it was going to be a spy book, okay? And I was very, very wrong. This book is about Count Rostov, the titular gentleman, and he's just living in a hotel during a very turbulent half century. That's it. And yeah, it's a pretty turbulent half a century, you know, World War I, World War II. And this count is basically James Bond minus the womanizing shame and minus the killing. Or like also kind of like think Stephen Fry. He's intelligent. He's like a borderline polymath. Witty, charming, polite, considerate. Just a real stand-up dude, a real mensch. The absolute definition of gentleman. And the thing is, the book is just filled with Count Rostov's charisma. So it really was a pleasure to read. First of all, the language and the voice, like the narrative voice, is basically the voice of Count Rostov. And so you can imagine what it's like having, you know, the words of this Gold Star gentleman just telling you a story. And it felt like, you know, it was over canapes and champagne, you know. I was just like enthralled, in his thrall, Amor Towles', just like enraptured, captured, as I was expecting to be, right? I know how, I've read The Lincoln Highway, I know how just like a master Amor Towles is. And he just uses normal words, you know, and somehow he creates that effect that this is like a classic book, you know, without using any of that archaic or anachronistic language. And it's really something. And as I said, like, I was expecting the language to be that good because I read The Lincoln Highway, and like, that's a seriously high bar to hit, especially because since I read the book to now, I've just been romanticizing how great he is, right? So we have this super charismatic protagonist, this charismatic narrator, and he just sucked me into this beautifully written world of the Metropole. And, you know, the Metropole felt so much larger than its four physical walls, and so much larger inside them than all of the political shit that's happening outside. Cause like, I became a co-conspirator of Rostov's. Like, we were partners in crime, and all of the shenanigans were shenanigans that we got up to together. And like, whenever Rostov spoke about wine or history or ballet or whatever, it was like him inviting me to see the world how he saw it. It was very wholesome and contributory, if that's a word, because I didn't feel condescended to. And Rostov's gentle manliness, it includes discipline, because it's a fucking discipline to see the world as a beautiful place, like full of wonder and possibility, and not like a shitty, cynical place packed with povos and communists. And Towles captured that traditional, patriarchal, but in a good way, Victorian, you know, went to boarding school kind of idea of perfect gentleman. And he captured it perfectly. And like, secondly, And this really crept up on me. A Gentleman in Moscow is really all about relationships, like friendships, work relationships, bunking relationships, friendships with enemies, relationships we have between just like one human and another, however, we classify them. Yeah, it just crept up on me. And it could have been because I was reading a spy book, right? And maybe I held on to that idea that this is going to be a, spy book just a bit too long. Like every few pages, I was literally like, now it's going to turn into a spy novel. But like house arrest, the politics, the revolving door of characters, all of those elements, it just kind of felt like something was about to happen, like just about to happen, gonna happen, on the cusp of something big. And then, like, before I knew it, I was halfway through the book, and it's a pretty big book. Like, and yeah, I don't have it here. And looking back, I was like, wait, what? All of these things that happened, the shenanigans, the dinners, the drinks, the rendezvous, the coups, the wars, the book had happened already, or was already happening while I was waiting for the book to happen. And that's just like life, like my life, certainly, right? But also Rostov's life, right? He's under house arrest. The dude's trapped in a fucking hotel. And as soon as I realized that, the beauty of the relationships in the book started showing up. And they were there all along. I just didn't see it. It's the story of our lives, isn't it? And now this could have been all me thinking and wanting it to be a good spy novel. Or I could chalk it down to that fucking master that Amor Towles is. And I reckon this effect, the effect that a Gentleman in Moscow had on me is by design. Not least because Amor Towles was up to these magic tricks in the Lincoln Highway. Okay, so thirdly, finally, this brings us to A Gentleman in Moscow and how it relates to time. What left the greatest impression on me about this book is like our, or humans, man's capacity to adapt to our surroundings and ultimately thrive, right? Rostov's basically a man at leisure. I think he even said at the beginning of the book that, working is ungentlemanly, like having a profession, that farmer, potatoer, having a profession is ungentlemanly. But unlike these Nepo babies nowadays, for the Count, what that actually means is that it's both not only his privilege, but also his duty to master himself and the finer things in life, not just for his education. And boy, has the meaning of education like completely changed over time. But not just for his education, but for others, for me, for us, humanity, culture, civilization, posterity. So like Rostov's way of sharing his knowledge of different languages, dancing, how to seat a table, is him exercising his duty as a gentleman, which is, I reckon why I basically never felt condescended to by him. And then part of this gentleman being a gentleman was that he was afforded the luxury because of his station of musing on life philosophically. So like Rostov's philosophical musings. Again, not in the Nepo baby taking one side just so you can bash the other side kind of way, which, by the way, given the setting of the book, he could have so easily fucking done. And this brings me back to the discipline part. He's able to stand outside of his feelings, outside of his opinions and thoughts, and just do all this thinking for mankind, which all in all then paints a picture, like just generally paints a picture of what it would take to make it through the turbulence of life in general, right? Like, yeah, I got cuts. Yeah, some hurt still. I got wounds, they're still open. Lessons learned, some bitter, some sweet, but ultimately I'm here. And through it all, I'm actually, unscathed. And I know what you're thinking. This Rostov guy, he was literally born with 10 silver spoons in every one of his holes, right? But homeboy literally lived through a time when they were killing people, like literally killing people like him for being just who they were. And this gentleman, he lived his life gracefully and charmingly and endearingly, because ultimately through it all, he was always considerate of others. And he was hardly ever a dick. And that's how you live a good life. Righteous.